Basics, a weekly YouTube series featuring play recipes, classic art, and classic science projects that every parent, educator, and caregiver should have in their toolkit. I'm Anna from Babble Dabble Do, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make 3 homemade paints using pantry ingredients. So let's get started. We're going to be making 3 types of paints today. We're going to be making a pudding paint, a corn syrup paint, and a cornstarch and vinegar paint. All of them have different benefits and different reasons to use them, and I'm going to talk about those with each of the recipes. We're going to start off with pudding paint. This is a great alternative to finger paints. It's very creamy, it's thick, it holds color well, and it dries fairly well too. So this is a great paint for young kids who want to experiment, with their fingers or for large brushes, large areas. It's a very easy to use paint that really feels like your typical finger paints or tempera paints. Now there's 2 ways of making pudding paint. If you're making a very large batch, one way to do it is to start with a vanilla instant pudding mix. So when I make this paint, I start with my pudding mix, empty it into a bowl, and then you're going to use ice cold water. So for this pudding mix, I'm going to use 2 cups of ice cold water. The reason it needs to be cold is it helps the pudding mix gel. If it's too warm, the pudding mix will sort of be too liquidy. Standard pudding mix is made with milk, but we're not going to use milk in this version. So then you can mix it together. I like to go ahead and put this in a stand mixer for a couple minutes on low speed. And then when you're done with that, you're going to put this in the refrigerator for a couple hours or overnight if you have the time. And what you end up with afterwards is a thick mixture. So this is after it's sat for a night. And at this point we can go ahead and make different colors of paint with it. So I like to use an empty old muffin tin for making paint. It just keeps the paint contained very easily, and it's great for little fingers and big brushes. And then you're going to simply add food coloring to this. Food coloring is going to be the base for most of these paints to give them color. And then all you do is add a couple of drops of color into each of the colors that you're mixing up. And then stir them up. So this paint is very thick and slightly transparent. It behaves a lot like finger paint, as I said, or tempera paints. It's not super vibrant, but it covers a large area very quickly. An even easier version of pudding paint is to simply take ready-made pudding snacks and mix in food coloring. That's it. It's really easy. And the best part about it is that because they come in individual containers, you're literally mixing the paint together in the container that the kids are going to use it from. So all you do is take your pudding, put in a few squeezes of food coloring, and mix it up. So this is my little shortcut, and you don't even have to wait for the pudding to dry. It's a little thicker, it's a little creamier. This style of pudding paint is kind of thick to spread around, but it's still a super easy alternative to regular paints, and this is perfect for finger paint. Kids will love it, they'll want to taste it. It's a fabulous paint for fingers. we're making today is corn syrup paint. Now I know what you're thinking because I thought the same thing the first time I tried this recipe. I thought it's going to be sticky. It's going to attract ants. Actually, it does neither of those things. It is sticky when you apply it, but overnight it dries to like a very glossy, almost like a glazed look. So to make corn syrup paint, all you're going to do is take clear corn syrup. You can find this next to maple syrup at the supermarket. And put it into individual containers, just a squeeze full. And then add a few drops of food coloring. You really don't need a lot of food coloring with this. It colors it very well with just a minimal amount of added color. This paint takes 1 minute to make, if that. And it's just a really gorgeous looking paint. It's very thick and it holds the color really well. And the cool thing about it is that it dries just like this. So it dries with this really great shiny texture to it. The third type of paint that I'm going to show you how to make today is a cornstarch and vinegar based paint. When it dries pretty thick and it's a little bit flaky because of the cornstarch, but it holds its color very well. So one alternative I did not talk about was simply adding water and food coloring together and using that as a paint. You can do that. That sort of ends up with a watercolor style of paint, sort of thin and transparent. This paint is a little thicker, so it will hold, it will cover up more. So if you're sketching underneath something, this would be a great paint to paint over it because you won't see the marks underneath. So there's a simple ratio with this paint, and it's 2 parts cornstarch to 3 parts vinegar. So when I mix it up, I basically add in my cornstarch to individual containers. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in 3 parts of vinegar for every 2 parts of cornstarch. Once you have your vinegar and cornstarch in the individual containers, go ahead and add a few squeezes of food coloring. And stir to combine. Now, the cornstarch and vinegar do tend to separate when left unstirred. So occasionally when you're using this paint, you are going to have to go ahead and give it a quick stir just to make sure that the cornstarch and vinegar are mixed together and not separating. So because this paint is fairly liquidy, I would definitely recommend that you use it with thicker paper like cardstock or watercolor paper if you have it. And as I mentioned, you are going to want to stir a little bit as you wet your brush with it. And you can see I'm getting sort of a nice pastel palette here with this type of paint. And when this dries, it does tend to dry opaque and slightly flaky depending on how much cornstarch is in there. Sometimes you don't want to go too thick with the cornstarch because then it will flake off the page. So you want to make sure that the cornstarch and vinegar are well combined. And that's it in this week's episode of Creative Basics. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make paint at home using a few household items. Be sure to subscribe and come back next week because I'm going to be showing you how to dye pasta, which is a great thing to do for art projects, for craft projects, and more. See you next week.